In this video, we will be dismantling and rebuilding this piston pump. Some of the tools you are going to need is a 1/2 inch combination wrench, a 7/8 inch combination wrench, a 1/2 inch nut driver, a torque wrench which reads inch pounds, a 1/2 inch socket, a 7/8 inch socket, and a socket extender to be able to reach some of the harder to reach bolts. For the piston pump you are working with, they may require slightly different sizes than what we are going to be using for this one. First step in removing the process is to remove our 4 1/2 inch nuts from the top of our discharge manifold. When this is done, we will lift up the discharge manifold straight off and place it aside. Inside there are guides and O-rings. Those will be removed, and 2 balls that need to be retained when you remove them from the system. Flip it over. We will now remove the discharge manifold. This process is speeded up so that time constraints can be met. Hopefully you are not working quite this fast. Remove it by lifting straight up. Inside there are 2 guides and O-rings. Place them off to the side, along with 2 rubber balls that need to be retained again. Once that is done, we will work on removing the 8 nuts from the outer ring of the pump system. This is the pump casing itself being removed from the pump housing. We work around working all 8 of these. As you can tell, I am setting these nuts and components out in a layout so that way I know which pieces go where, and I will have an easier time on reassembly. On the inside of this pump, there are ones that cannot be reached by the 1/2 inch nut driver, so we'll use a 1/2 inch combination wrench to be able to reach inside of these. Loosen them in a counterclockwise direction and remove and retain them into the proper locations. Once we have all of those removed, using the spin and drop technique, we will be able to remove the pump housing and gain access to our piston inside. By lifting straight off, we are able to gain access to the inside on both sides of our pump casings. We do not want to bind those as we go. Using a 7/8 inch wrench, we remove the plastic nut from the side of the diaphragm, remove the plastic nut, the diaphragm itself, and the guide. Push up on the shaft to remove the other side. Now once we have this assembled, we need to inspect for any cracks or breaks in the pistons, the diaphragms, the guides, the shafts, make sure there's no gouges in them. We need to also inspect the guides and the plastic balls to make sure there's no gouges in them that could possibly cause them to not operate properly. To reassemble, we push the shaft straight through, put on the guide along with the other diaphragm, reapply our plastic nut to the other side, tighten it down hand tight. Using our 7/8 inch wrench, we tighten it down a little bit tighter, and then using our torque wrench to 50 inch pounds, we torque it down. Once we have that done, we will put on our pump casings, along with our 8 nuts on each side. The reason you want to get that shaft in the center to 50 foot-pounds is if we do not get that properly tightened, the shaft will hit on each inside of the pump casing, causing premature failure of the pump. Once we have all 8 of these nuts applied, we'll use our 1/2 inch combination wrench and our 1/2 inch nut driver to tighten these down to a hand-tight torqueness. We'll want to use a star pattern to apply equal pressure to the inside of the gasket. We do not want the gasket to crush or pinch in any way, so we want to apply equal pressure. Once we have all of these hand-tight, using our 1/2 inch wrench and our nut driver, we'll use our torque wrench set to 100 inch pounds in order to tighten this down the rest way. We'll want to once again go in a star pattern to get this done, of doing both the inside and the outside nuts on both sides of the casing. I only did one side in this example for time constraints. Once we have that done, it is time to put our discharge manifold on. We start by putting our balls onto the inside of our guides in, our O-rings, and then by dropping straight down, we apply the last piece, the actual discharge manifold. When we're done with that, we use our nut driver to tighten it hand tight. Then we will use our torque wrench set to 260 inch pounds and torque them down tight. Once that is done, we'll finish up by our intake manifold on the bottom. Put in our balls and guides, our O-rings, and by putting it straight down, put our intake manifold on, put our 4 nuts in, and we'll tighten those down also to 260 inch pounds. And that will complete the rebuild process of a piston pump, along with the inspection and how to do this properly. I hope your next pump goes well and doesn't leak.